Now, into the ticket office of Disneyland.
Oh boy, let's do this.
Don't think the CIA is going to be trying to hack your second-gen iPod.
I didn't think so. There might have been a lot of illegal music on there. I wouldn't doubt it. But, I mean...
You were supposed to bring death to the flagships, not join them.
Google has found a new way to piss me off.
iTunes is a constant source of embarrassment.
Behind-the-scenes camera crap.
Here, tell us about courage, Phil. Tell us about courage.
I am Nola. I can't do it anymore without laughing. I was going to do the whole thing.
Welcome, everyone, to the Calling All Platforms podcast. I am your host, Wes, and I'm here with Landon.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Caleb.
All right.
And we are here to talk all things tech.
Woohoo.
I think we're a little spunky today.
Look, he just said it 3 times. It reminded me of McConaughey, and I don't know. Things happen.
Yep.
I like it.
All right. Hey, we're here to talk things about tech, not Matthew McConaughey, unless he does something in tech, I guess.
That's fair.
That's besides the point. Let's go ahead and let's talk. Let's go ahead and I kind of blanked there for a second. I was like, dear listener, I'm a little tired today. I didn't get much sleep last night, and I've been up all day, and I'm tired. So I apologize now for any of the inconsistencies more than normal inconsistencies that will happen, and I'm going to say they will happen.
And will not be edited out.
Thanks. Appreciate it. And it'd probably be a special episode he'll put together of just Wes' funny mistakes or something.
You know, I should start saving all the stuff that I edit out and make a bonus episode of just Wes.
You could probably make one of just all of us, to be honest. Like Wes episode of Landon, just the stuff that we say, or just the... Because my favorite thing is, like, whenever Landon can't say a word, he goes, flibber-dibber-dibber-da.
It's true.
And it would be funny for him to just consecutively put every one of those and see how long the episode would go. Or anytime that, like, anytime that you hear Caleb go, okay. Just start ranting. Or just, or any of his funny little quotes or sayings before something, I think would be hilarious, because there's times I have to mute myself because I'm laughing really hard and stuff like that. So I'm just saying, it'd probably be worth it. Did you know you can subscribe to our Patreon, and that could happen? Just saying.
There you go.
Support Landon, because, man, putting up with just me, or both of us.
All three of us.
Anyway, I'll tell you what. Let's get into some tech here. I have to be honest, listener, we're going to get into this one. And we kind of talked a little bit about it before we started recording, because I wanted a better idea of what this was exactly. So Microsoft, they have been talking about adding it's called a chat GPT to its new Azure services and AI services, or OpenAI services, as well as Bing, and their Office, and it seems like they want it for all their services. And so I kind of talked with Caleb a little bit about exactly what this is, because a lot of people are like, wow, this is going to be a big, huge thing. And maybe, listener, you've probably seen this saying, oh, it's going to really compete with Google, things like that. But I feel like it's worth at least noting and kind of seeing exactly what this is, and not really to give a side of, yeah, let's have this war on search engines, but more of what this is, what it can do, and maybe more of possibilities. So, this OpenAI service, I'm going to actually have Caleb say this, because he could say it a lot better than I can, because I'm Caleb, I'm going to have you say this one for me.
Okay.
Because I could get jumbled.
So, the history of it, and we actually did mention this on the podcast back in, 2019 or whenever.
Yeah, it was 2019.
OpenAI is an organization that Microsoft invested $1 billion into. It was an AI startup that they invested a ton of money into, basically with the idea that, hey, you're going to generate something, we want, access to whatever you generate when you have done that. And over the past year, OpenAI has released a bunch of really interesting stuff. The most recent of which you may have heard on the news is ChatGPT. So, what ChatGPT is in layman's terms, it's a chatbot, right? Like, you think back to the early days on the internet, you could go and find chatbots, and they were supposed to be like kind of natural language models, but they were terrible. And you would ask them questions and try to carry on conversations with them. And it was like trying to carry on a conversation with a particularly verbose blender. It just didn't work. It was not great. And then, they got a little bit more sophisticated, but you ran into the issue with that one that I think it was Microsoft actually put on Twitter and just let it tweet and have conversations with people live on Twitter. And within, I want to say, about like 90 minutes or something like that, the thing had turned into like a suicidal, like homicidal, super angry, just horrible nightmare, and they pulled it. Like it was live for not very long on the internet before it became like a psychopath. So
didn't they give it a name? What was the name?
They did. I can't remember what the name was. I just remember that it happened. I remember thinking that, yeah, that's how I feel after about an hour and a half on the internet too. So, so, valid. So that's kind of where we were at up until about 2 months ago when ChatGPT started making the rounds. And what ChatGPT is it is a language model, right? You ask it questions, it responds, it asks you questions, it carries on a conversation, right? And you can give it prompts and it will write things for you, like sometimes quite lengthy things. And what sets ChatGPT apart from anything else is really just that it's so much better than anything else we have seen before, to the point where you could very well like ask ChatGPT, hey, I want you to, write an email for me to send to my boss at work, write my resignation letter from such and such a job or something like that. And it will give you a really good resignation letter that you could absolutely use. Like the data sets that it has available include a whole bunch of like academic research papers, like a whole bunch of novels, blog posts and stuff like that. The scripts from YouTube videos, like literally hundreds of thousands of YouTube videos and stuff like that, to the point where a very popular thing among tech YouTubers right now is on Twitter, especially. You can find folks like MKBHD and Linus of Linus Tech Tips, and I think it was Austin Evans did one. I think iJustine did one. Like there's a couple of them that they have posted screenshots of ChatGPT responding to the phrase, write me a script for a so-and-so video. Like, so write me a script for an MKBHD review of a headphone or something like that. And it will spit out a script that sounds genuinely like Marquez Brownlee wrote it. Like, it's scary how good this is. And one of the interesting things about it is it's so good at sounding authoritative at what it says, but it is occasionally also just wrong. So that's worth noting. It's not perfect, but it's just very impressive. So that's what OpenAI has been doing. They also produced DALL-E 2 last year. Probably saw that making waves in the news as well. The image generating AI that's just uncannily good. The reason that this is so noteworthy right now, and particularly as people are talking about it in relation to Google, is mostly just that the concept of being able to take something like this and put it in charge of interpreting people's searches in a search engine and then generating responses for them that aren't just a list of results, but is an actual paragraph about what they're searching for that includes information from all the results, but just sums it up for them nicely into an easy to digest, here's a block of text, you just read this and that's what you wanted to know. That's a very powerful addition to a search engine. And it's absolutely, like, guaranteed something that Google has been working on for a very long time. You see them making strides in that direction with the natural language processing for stuff like Google Assistant. The difference is that ChatGPT appears to be light years ahead of anything that Google has done. And so, people are hypothesizing that Google might be a little bit concerned about the possibility of Microsoft adding this to Bing, making this possible. That would feel like quite the leap forward versus what's available on Google right now. So it's been making its way through the news at the moment just because of the possibility of this being integrated into actual products that people actually use. Because up to this point, all of this AI stuff has just been like, hey, this is a fun toy, but that's kind of it. But now, you can use some of these AI image generators to actually do stuff, and that you could sell even, which is a whole other question about like, well, does that infringe on the copyright of the people whose images were used to generate the data set for these image AIs that they're using to generate the images? That there's actually a law or a court case dealing with exactly that right now in California. So, if we'll see what happens there. But
yeah, I like the way I look at these things, and I think like if you've done some research into these things, you'd see most people are along these same lines. I look at these things as tools, and I'm hoping, I mean, obviously people are going to use them in different ways because that's how people use everything. Things are as good as the user that's using them. But like, especially the like Dolly 2 and whatnot, I would use that as, it's like, okay, if I want to make a logo or a like a picture for a post or something like that, it's like, okay, I want to do this, and then I would use that and then take from that and basically use it as a starting point. Or same thing with like the chat GPT, like, okay, I want a book report on such and such a book, but then obviously you're going to want to tweak it and make it your own and things like that. Or I think it'd be a good thing to use for build me a resume. If you don't want to go and find a resume template, it can make one for you, and then you just plug in your information. Like I think that's the way these things should be used. Again, that's probably not the way some people are going to use them, but as the average user, I think most people are probably going to do that. And I like that idea inside of Microsoft's suite of apps and different things like that. If it's used properly, and if it's built it, like if Microsoft does do this, they can control it to a sense that it is used for those purposes. They can make it so you can't just take this exactly and put it in, or and whatnot.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll do that, maybe they won't. I don't know, but hopefully they do, because like Caleb's saying, it can be used nefariously, and just bad actors are going to they're going to do their thing, and hopefully it can be somewhat controlled in that type of sense. Obviously the OpenAI stuff it is what it is. People are going to use it the way they want to use it, but if it's inside of something else, hopefully it can be held back slightly.
That gives Microsoft a lot more control over it and that sort of thing. And I think that, like saying, generate a resume for me could be very useful for like generating a resume template or something like that. Like, and then you customize it from there. Or like, if I were in college right now and I were going to be like, oh gosh, how can I use this chat GPT tool to make my classes easier? I'm not going to be like, write me a book report about such and such a book, but I might be, hey, summarize this book for me in 500 words or something like that. Highlight the key points of this book and see what I get. That probably only works for books that are in the public domain, but that's the sort of thing that it could be used for. Or, image generation. If Microsoft adds Dolly 2 to their Office suite, and we were kind of talking about this, being able to generate clip art, instead of having to go search for it, you can just type in a prompt and say, hey, this is what I want my clip art to look like, and then it just generates it for you. Like, there's a lot of very useful ways that this could be implemented, and it remains to be seen exactly what Microsoft is planning on doing with it. All we know for certain at this point is that they're planning something, some kind of integration, and that they plan to invest a further $10 billion into OpenAI to continue developing these tools. So if this turns out to be, what it could be. Like, it's entirely possible that this does represent a quantum leap forward over what Google has available in the space, and that could genuinely result in a significant shift in what makes sense in terms of internet searching. So it'll be something interesting to watch over as it kind of progresses over the next little while.
Yeah.
Yes. Agree.
And I've heard this comparison before, but I like to compare it to when calculators were starting to become a thing. And there were so many people that were worried, oh, people are going to just forget how to do, simple math because they have a calculator nobody can use. And for a long time, you couldn't use calculators in certain scenarios because they wanted you to memorize these things. And nowadays, it's like, hey, here's how you can set it up, but put it into your calculator so you can get do it and whatnot. I'm hoping that that's kind of the direction that this goes. And I think, again, for the majority of people that will be, but it's so early, it's hard to tell. It's so up in the air at the moment.
Yep. I gotta say, I have several math teachers that I would really like to go back to and just pull my phone out and shove it in their face and say, look what I have in my pocket literally all the time. Guess what? Yep. It's a calculator.
And it's funny because, like, my job in particular, I use math on a daily basis in my job. And I have a smartwatch, and I purposefully have a watch face on that I have that's on when I'm at work with a calculator on it. So I just click on it and do all the math on my watch because it's a whole lot easier than doing it in my head. I mean, I could do some of it, but I don't have to.
I remember at the time thinking every time a teacher would stand up and say, look, you're not always going to have a calculator on you, thinking to myself, Casio makes calculator watches. Like, that's a thing that exists. Yep. And they've existed since the 80s, guys. Yeah. Like, this isn't new technology. And then phones happened while I was in high school, and I was like, hey, some of these phones have calculator apps on them. And then smartphones happened right after I graduated, and I was all like, guess what? Guess what I literally have on me all the time? That's right. It's a calculator. You idiots. Anyways. And then there's my physics teacher from high school who absolutely never said that I couldn't use a calculator because I wouldn't always have a calculator on me. No, Mr. Stevens was honest. When Mr. Stevens told me to put the calculator away, he's all like, because you can't use that on the end of your test. Oh, why can't I use it on the end of your test? Because some idiot somewhere decided that you can't. Now put it away. Like, he was honest. They're not going to let you have your... In fact, he was so honest to me. He sat me down midway through the year in AP Physics and was all like, listen, I know you can't do calculus. I know you can't do calculus because you're not in the AP Calculus class like everybody else in this class is, which means you can't actually do the math that this class requires in your head. You've been passing tests so far because I let you use a TI-89, and that can do calculus. But on the AP test, they're not going to let you use that calculator. So you may not want to sign up for the AP test. And I was like, well, gall, I really appreciate the honesty. So he was a good teacher. I had some not great math teachers, though, that's for sure. Anyways.
No, so that's what that is, and wanted to bring it to your attention and just kind of really explain what it is, why it can be important, and obviously, we always love technology and want to speculate and this could be this or this could be this or this, what we do. Hopefully, I'm along the lines with Landon that's where it goes. I do remember that, like, going back to that calculator thing. Like, I do remember people talking about that, and I mean everything's just progressed further and further, and hopefully the majority we can use it as a tool, and use it the right way. So.
Yep.
But I'm sure this year we're going to hear more of it because, I mean, it was like within 3 months we've been steadily getting drips of this type of information from Microsoft. So who knows? Maybe Google might all of a sudden be like, oh, by the way, here's ours, and it's great too.
It's true. It could happen. They've just been doing it behind closed doors, so who knows?
So like I said, we'll keep our ears to the ground to it and talk a little bit more about it. So that's pretty much all the Microsoft news I have. Really, you probably also have heard that there's been layoffs, in the tech industry world. It's kind of what happens really nowadays. I know maybe it might be a little bit more of a layoff for most tech industry because there was a lot of hiring for tech during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and now they're kind of reeling it back, with all the people that they've hired and employees and things, and it's kind of it does suck. I mean, like I've been laid off before, and it does suck, and I don't know about these other two if they've ever had a job, but I mean, it's livelihoods, it's families that have. It does suck, but this is par for the course, I guess, when stuff happens and preparing. And
I feel like it's not necessarily very surprising. I think anybody could have looked at the hiring practices of these big tech organizations over the past 3 years and gone, well, this is not going to end well. It just seems like their hiring was extremely short-sighted for a very kind of extended period of time.
Yeah.
And now this is the repercussions of it, and a lot of people are being affected. Now, to be fair, most of the people that are being affected right now, like that are kind of they're getting talked about a lot, are the folks that they're engineers, a lot of them. They had a fairly high paying job and probably have quite a bit of financial stability, and they probably got a pretty good severance package and so on and so forth. So it's like they'll be okay for a couple of months while they look for something else. Hopefully they can find something else with the market being absolutely inundated with software engineers and whatnot. That's kind of the scary part right there. But it's not as bad as it could have been. What's going to be worse is when I feel like, Amazon starts laying off all of the warehouse workers and the delivery drivers and so on and so forth that they've hired over the past 3 years. But their shipping business is actually growing, so that may not happen. I don't know. It could turn into something far scarier than it is right now, but it's still not good. Nobody's happy about this.
No, it never is. It's not a good.
Yeah,
thing. It really is. So, but I mean, other than that, that's kind of it for Microsoft's thing for gaming. For Microsoft, they're just pretty much holding everything till this Wednesday, the 25th, for their direct for any kind of gaming. So there's not really on that side either on there, but we'll get into gaming later in the podcast. But let's go ahead and let's move on. Let's go ahead and move on over to Landon. Landon, got a few things you want to talk about?
I have a thing to talk about. And this is Google being Google. So inside of Google search, if you now search for a podcast or anything like that, it now will no longer give results that link to or even play buttons for a podcast inside of Google Podcasts, which is unfortunate.
Okay.
Because for a while there, if you were to search for a podcast or even just a certain subject, if there was a podcast on it, it'd pop up and it'd give you the option to play the podcast right there inside of search via the Google Podcasts app. But they've taken that out for some reason. They've said this was on purpose. Don't know why, but they've done that. So I'm really hoping that they're not planning on just killing the podcasts app inside of Google, because that would be unfortunate. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to do that. It is Google. They haven't done anything with the podcast app for about a year or more. I mean, there was a while there where they were updating things and making it better and doing a lot of good things with it, but then they haven't touched it in a while. So this isn't looking great for that. So that's unfortunate. But I mean, that unfortunately, that's all of my tech news for this week.
It's that time of year, so. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. Hey, Caleb, you have a thing?
Holy crap. So you say it's that time of year, but...
I said that on purpose.
Normally, you would be correct.
Normally, yeah. So this past week, Apple did some things, kind of a lot of things. So we're going to start with the updated MacBook Pros and updated Mac Mini that they just released. Like they just put a YouTube video up that said, "Hey, this is what we're releasing," and then they posted them to the store. It is worth noting, actually, metadata from the pages on the store that people were kind of snooping. It looks like they intended to launch these last year, like at the end of the year, sometime in like the October-November timeframe, and they didn't happen. So that's probably why. Normally, Apple does not do stuff like this in January. This is really weird.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and talk about it, listener. MacBook Pros have been updated. Now you can now get both the M2 Pro and the M2 Max in either the 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pro. It's very similar to the way that it was in last generation, except they just now have the M2 Pro and M2 Max chips in them. It's worth noting that, yes, this is the first time you have heard the words M2 Pro and M2 Max in a hardware announcement, because this is the first time that they've talked about them. So, new processors. We'll get to that in a second. The Mac Mini has also been updated with the M2, and it starts at $600, which is $100 less than it was before.
Yay.
So, not technically a $500 Mac, but Landon actually pointed this out to me. If you can get the education discount, then it does in fact start at $500 for the base model M2 Mac Mini. And as a person who does in fact have access to the university store, that may be a thing that's happening. Anyways. But also, because I can't be the only one that wins something here, the Mac Mini with the M2 Pro starts at $1,300.
Yes.
And Landon's very pleased about that.
Yes.
So I just want to say that the $500 Mac Mini and the prosumer Mac Mini both seemed really easy to us, really easy wins for Apple last year. They were planning on it. They just didn't quite make it.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do.
3 weeks late.
I think it has a lot to do with getting enough product in to actually be able to ship it to customers.
That could be it.
I think with all the different stuff happening in China right now, like all the different lockdowns and whatnot still going on, I think Apple wanted to release these products knowing they're going to be popular, but they wanted to release them with enough stock that they wouldn't sell out immediately and people would have to wait till now anyways to get them. So
yeah,
why not just push the launch back until now, which actually makes sense. I am okay with it. It's weird, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with them pushing the launch back a little bit. I am happy to note that, like, I was feeling a little crazy at the end of last year when I was looking at the wish list, everything, I was getting that prepped, and I'm like, this just seems like such low-hanging fruit, Apple. Why the heck did you not do this? Like, what the crap? And okay, yeah, it is low-hanging fruit, and they did in fact do it. So here we are. So that's the big announcements, right? Now, a little bit more detail. Let's talk about the new chips in the M2 family of processors. We have, obviously, the M2 already existed, 8-core, up to a 10-core GPU, which is an improvement over the M1, which was a 7 or 8-core GPU and then an 8-core CPU. So, we already knew about that one. That one's been around since since the MacBook Air and the stupid piece of crap laptop that shall not be named launched back, toward the end of last year. Toward the beginning of last year. So, the M2 Pro builds off of the same architecture. It's not quite twice the chip, but has a 12-core CPU in it, up to a 19-core GPU, 200 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth versus 100 on the M2, and up to 32 gigs of RAM. Now, it's worth noting, we're just going to do a direct comparison to the M1 Pro, which had a 10-core CPU, up to a 10-core. Actually, you could get versions of the M1 Pro that only had 8 cores. up to a 16-core GPU, which, again, less than the 19-core maximum, and the same 32 gig maximum for memory. Okay, so that's where those two are different. Obviously, the M2 Pro also includes a new neural engine that has more cores in it and an enhanced media ProRes encoder thing that makes all of the Apple Silicon processors extremely fast at ProRes workflows. So that's the M2 Pro. The M2 Max is actually kind of a little bit more interesting. So that one has a 12-core CPU, up to a 38-core GPU, 400 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, which is, that's on track with what the M1 Max was, but does feature up to 96 gigabytes of RAM, which is a lot. Okay, so by comparison, the M1 Max was a 10-core CPU with up to 32 GPU cores and a max RAM configuration of 64 gigabytes. Okay, I just want to take a minute to toss in here the M1 Ultra. Obviously, the M2 Max, the M2 Pro, they're not really designed to compete with the M1 Ultra, but just as a point of reference, the M1 Ultra has a 20-core CPU, up to 64 GPU cores, 800 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, which, to be clear, absolutely nothing even comes close to touching, and 128 gigs of RAM. So, the M2 Max is interesting to me because it kind of sits in between where the M1 Max was and what the M1 Ultra is in a couple of key ways. Obviously, the GPU cores, there's more. They're getting closer to that maximum 64-core GPU. And 96 gigabytes of RAM is much closer to 128 gigs of RAM than 64. So, that's what we're talking about here. It's a whole bunch of numbers, and obviously until we get real-world testing, we're not going to know for sure exactly what the performance uplift of the M2 Pro and the M2 Max is over their predecessors. That being said, there have been some leaked benchmarks from these things, so we have a few data points that we can kind of just glance at, okay? And in some of those, this is great. In some of those tests, not all of them, but some of them, the M2 Max's 12-core CPU is performing about the same as the 20-core CPU on the M1 Ultra. Yeah. And theoretically, we would expect the M2 Ultra to be about twice the speed of the M2 Max, because that's kind of what happened with the M1 Ultra over the M1 Max. So it says some interesting things about the direction that this generation of processors from Apple is going. And I just kind of love that on top of all of these potential big strides forward in improvement or in performance, and simply the fact that, you get more RAM in the top configuration now. And we've increased the number of GPU cores available across the entire line. The graphics processors are all just faster, just more powerful than they were last generation. That's all great, and that's all very good. But, I'm really interested to see from this point forward, what does the M1 Ultra look like? And, you can still get this in one of the best designed laptops on the planet. The MacBook Pros didn't get fatter. They didn't get worse from last year. They're still really good and very thin. And, it's great. I'm super happy with it.
Yes.
I mean, granted, I'm not buying any of the MacBook Pros or anything like that, but I'm just happy that there's a $500 Mac Mini if you can get the education discount. And the M2 is no slouch,
Yeah, and I'm very stoked about the M2 Pro coming to the Mac Mini, replacing the Intel version. And now I'm just trying really hard to not pre-order that machine. I don't necessarily need it at the moment, but I really want it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I will say, when I told my wife that a new Mac Mini had launched and whatnot, and that, it's only $600, that's down $100 from what last generation was, she was just kind of like, and then you could give your old one to me. That would be nice. I'm like, Well, you're not talking me out of this very
It's like
effectively now, are you?
You didn't say no, so
And now that I know I can get one on the education store for $100 discount, that's really darn tempting. So yes, that was the Mac announcements this past week, and okay, kind of came out of nowhere. I'm not complaining. Quite happy, in fact.
yes.
It's also not the only new hardware that Apple announced this week, which is just, I don't, like, freaking pig's flu this week, listener. I don't know what the heck was going on. Anywho, it's been a minute since Apple launched the HomePod. And it's been a minute since we've talked about the HomePod. I guess the last time was when they announced the HomePod Mini. So yeah, nobody was really expecting anything crazy to happen with HomePods in the, third week of January 2023.
Honestly, I think most people thought the HomePod was going to just get canceled.
Yeah, I mean, the HomePod Mini, I guess, has been selling okay.
Well,
so I
just the
expected
regular
them to maybe
HomePod.
Oh, that one did stop selling. No, they officially discontinued that in like 2021, I think.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to bring it back.
it...
I thought they were just going to keep with the Mini.
Oh yeah, no, but no, listener, the HomePod 2, it's a thing. It's available for pre-order now. In fact, if you would like. To be absolutely clear, it's not like a groundbreaking redesign of the HomePod. It's just a HomePod that takes some of the top touchscreen design cues from the HomePod Mini, but still, it's just surprising that it exists at all. Like, I was not expecting that. Now, by all accounts, the original HomePod was an extremely good sounding speaker, and in terms of sound quality, was far and away better than any of the dedicated smart home speakers from Amazon or Google. It is worth noting that if you just wanted a really good Bluetooth speaker, there were definitely other options from companies like Sonos that were as good in terms of sound and did in fact have integrated smart home functionality as well. So it's not like the HomePod stood in a class of its own, but it was in that class. It was a very high tier device, but kind of held back by the fact that Siri isn't great, and the fact that the home, what do they call their smart home thing? HomeKit. The fact that HomeKit was just not very well supported. Okay. But now Matter is becoming a thing. So HomeKit is suddenly actually working okay. Siri is still kind of a limitation, but some people that have started to really like their HomePod minis might be in the market for something that just has better sound. So enter the HomePod 2. There's a couple of notable things about it. First of all, versus the original, it has a removable power cable, which seems like a no-brainer, but they didn't put it on the original.
That was such a weird thing to leave out.
Oh, yeah.
Or rather, keep in, I should say.
There you are. No, it's, and yeah, it was just dumb. So yeah, if your vacuum ran over the power cable for your HomePod, then your $350 HomePod was a brick. Great. Thanks, Apple. So yes, removable power cord. That's a significant upgrade. Also, worth noting, it's no longer $350. It's now $300. So $50 cut to the price, which actually kind of matches the cut to the price of the original HomePod that they made after it wasn't selling very well. But okay, there you go. Also, it now has some, it's got an upgraded processor in it. It uses the S7 processor that is that showed up originally in the Apple Watch, and it's got some of the same sensors and some of the same stuff that's in the HomePod Mini, which interestingly, the HomePod Mini also this past week now has temperature and humidity sensing has been unlocked via firmware update, and that will be present in the HomePod 2 as well, so that you can add that sensor to your HomeKit setup and installation. So yeah, Apple kind of just turned around and was like, you know what, this HomePod thing that we did, and we seemed like we were kind of just going to drop it. No, turns out, actually, no, we're doing the whole thing. Updates all around, everything is getting a little bit better. And That's weird. I was not expecting that, but okay. Thanks, Apple.
Yeah,
It was a weird week. I don't know.
it was.
Yeah. Weird week.
I remember waking up Tuesday and I saw something somewhere posted about someone just said new Mac or M2 Mac or something like that. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So I went to the Apple store and sure enough, M2 Mac Minis. I'm like, oh, well, looky there. That's neat.
Yep. I opened up, it was Mac Rumors I first saw that on, and they're all like, Apple has, posted an 18-minute video to their YouTube channel launching new hardware. And I was like, wait, what? So I went to YouTube and I watched it, and sure enough, it was basically just like an 18-minute video version of their little keynote videos going over the new stuff, which, all right, I guess.
And they also did it at a weird time. It was like 6 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, it
like
was.
Everyone, I guess on the East Coast, people are awake, but for the most part, on the West Coast, most people are still asleep, not paying attention.
It's like they were trying to surprise us. I don't know.
It was weird. And another weird thing, so when I did see it, and I went to the Apple Store app on my phone to look at the different specs on these new Mac Minis, and when I went to order one, it was still only giving me the options for the M1 Mac Mini and the Intel Mac Mini. I'm like, wait, what? If I go back to the page about the Mac Mini, it only shows M2 stuff. When I go to buy it, it's only what the heck? But it wasn't like buying, it was like pre-ordering still. Like, no, this doesn't make any sense. And then later on in the day, I went back and did it, and then it was fixed. But I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Their store was a little broken for a while.
Yeah, that's yep.
Which is, on par for those type of things.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's not a bad time to be an Apple customer right now, weirdly. They just need to cancel that freaking 13-inch MacBook Pro and I'll be happy. Freaking thing sucks. Anyways.
They have to give you, some things to rant about.
Look. They can release good Macs. I still have plenty of stuff to rant about. Like the iPhone 14 is the thing.
True.
First of all. And their iPads right now, like WTF. Anyways.
They got to give you one thing in each category.
You know what, Tim? You don't actually have to give me one thing in each category. I'd be fine with just universally liking the Mac again. That would be great.
Well, they have to change the software in order for that to happen.
Oh gosh, that search. Look, the settings app on macOS right now is a travesty of UI design, and I don't need to say anything else. It just is so bad. Anyways, look, you don't need to be introducing things for me to rant about because I'm about to talk about Twitter. Like, come on.
That's fair.
I don't need to be ranting about Apple right now. I've got Elon Musk. Anywho, this past week, all third-party clients for Twitter just stopped working. And everybody was confused. And everybody was concerned. And several days passed. And then Twitter announced that they have banned all third-party clients for Twitter. So, essentially what happened is they just unceremoniously broke the API that allowed third-party apps to work with Twitter. And then a couple of days later, they announced via, you guessed it, a tweet that they were going to be disallowing third-party apps. Did they tell the third-party app developers that this was going to be happening in advance? No. They found out when they woke up one morning and the API that they'd been using, some of them for over a decade, was broken. And that's it. Like, if you want to talk about a really great way to alienate, like, your entire developer community, that's how you do it. One fell swoop. Good job.
The other problem with this is not only did it break and just kill off any third-party apps, but the ability to like have a tweet thing on your website is gone. Or like if you want to say, like, put on your website a little thing that you can tweet to your account from that website saying something about such website or whatever, that's gone as well. This was all part of this API. And with this API gone, it's just all these options are just gone, which is, I mean, Elon, I to an extent, I understand the third-party app thing, whatever. But if you want people to use Twitter just in general, don't take away the ability to do that from someone's
Use
website.
Twitter?
I mean, what the heck, man? Oh,
Yeah, it's I don't know what is going on at Twitter these days, but I don't know.
I don't think anybody at Twitter knows what's going on at Twitter these days.
Oh, probably not. Probably not.
They're probably more
be
confused than
completely
we
honest.
are.
Yeah. Like, it would not surprise me if more than half the company woke up to find out that they couldn't check their own Twitter timeline via Tweetbot. And they were like, wait, what? Like, oh my gosh.
Wait, who took Elon drinking last night? What the heck?
Somebody gave him the keys to the data center. Who did it? Who did it? Oh, good times, Twitter. Just, it's, I have stopped using Twitter pretty much exclusively, but occasionally I will still just check back in just to watch the dumpster fire burn. It's fun.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And I wanted to, after that Twitter news, I wanted to end my tech news on a slightly higher note. So, the Lisa was a computer made by Apple. Turns out it was released almost exactly 40 years ago, because this past week, the Computer History Museum released the source code for the Lisa on its 40th anniversary. Nice. Now, this computer is technically the first graphical user interface sold to the public. That was not the Macintosh. Now, if you hear me talking about it, or if you go watch videos on the Calling All Platforms Tech YouTube channel, you will hear me say things like, the Mac was the computer that introduced the GUI to the masses. And yes, that's true, because almost nobody bought the Lisa, right? Like,
no.
It was not introducing anything to the masses. It was not mass produced.
It was like double the price of the Macintosh as well.
Oh, it was more than double. It was like almost triple.
It's funny because like the Lisa was Steve Jobs' baby until whoever was CEO at that time said, "Screw you, Steve, you're off." And Steve made the Mac as like I'm gonna show you, and then obviously won that fight.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, the Macintosh gets credited as the one for introducing graphical user interfaces to the world at large, which is fair, because that's what the Mac did, because people actually bought the Mac. But the Lisa does deserve a little bit of a note in history that, technically speaking, this was the first GUI available to the public for purchase. You just had to have 10 grand in order to buy it.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's my last piece of general tech news. I do have some gaming news. I don't know who's going first with gaming stuff or whatnot.
What? Well, I don't have any gaming news. I already kind of talked about that. So, I'll tell you what. Why don't we have Caleb start the gaming news?
Okay. Listener, the Dead Space 2 remake is a thing. I had really exciting news about the Dead Space 2 remake about 4 hours ago. As of recording this, it's 9:59 on January 22nd p.m., right? About 4 hours ago, I had really exciting news about the Dead Space 2, the Dead Space remake, not Dead Space 2 remake. It's, in my head, remake and sequel they're not the same thing. It's a remake of Dead Space, okay? The first one. Somebody live streamed 2 hours of gameplay from the beginning of the game through the first 2 hours of the game onto YouTube earlier today.
Oh.
And it went most of the day without being touched. You could go back and watch the VOD. But it has since, in the past 4 hours, been copyright struck by EA, because EA got an EA. And so now all of the fun times have ended. But I will say that I did watch not all of it, but some of it. And I don't think the reason EA pulled it is because, like, it showed off, oh, actually, this remake is a piece of crap or something like that. I think EA pulled it because EA got an EA. And that's it. It actually looked pretty good. So that was, kind of a reassuring thing. outside of the heavily curated like bits of the game that EA has been willing to show to the press thus far, outside of that, the remake still looks good. So if you loved the original Dead Space and you really want to experience that kind of that psychological horror again, not psychological, what am I talking about? Dead Space has almost no psychological horror. It's all body horror, whatever.
Yep.
If you want to experience that again, this remake looks like it's going to be pretty good. Okay. Now, next, I'm going to move on to our indie game spotlight of the week, which is the thing that I said I was going to bring back, and I'm bringing it back because I feel like we just need to give some recognition to the fact that folks like Nola Games are still actually making games. All right. So Noita is the game we're talking about. It's Noita. I'm not sure exactly how they wanted you to pronounce that, but there you are. It is the Falling Sand roguelite. Okay. So it's a roguelite game, procedurally generated levels, and you respawn when you die back at the beginning of a new procedurally generated set of levels. But because it's roguelite, you get to keep some of the stuff that you died with, essentially. Pixel-based physics, it's kind of like a voxel pixel type thing, very similar to Terraria in kind of the look of it and the design of it. So a lot of pixel art aesthetics to it, pretty retro looking, and obviously heavily physics based, that it, in a way that you kind of have fully procedurally generated destructible levels, which is interesting. They offer you the ability, and I'm not sure how deep this really is, to craft your own magic spells, right? So I'm not sure what level of customization is really available there, but from the bits of gameplay and the clips I have seen, it does look pretty interesting. And, to be fair, it's 3 developers, and it has a 94% on Steam currently. So it's very positively received. So there you go. Check it out. If you're interested, this week it is actually on sale as a part of the Humble Bundle Winter Sale. So you can get a little bit of a savings on it if you would like. But there you go. Noita from Nola Games is your indie game for this week.
Awesome. Like hearing about those.
Yeah.
Definitely good to promote them.
People are still making games just because the entire AAA industry is sitting there watching Microsoft and Sony spit at each other.
Yeah, no freaking kidding. And throwing their own little spits here and there too. Just like, oh wait.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yep, good times. Good times. But yes, so that's that. I do have one last piece of gaming news. Do I want to do that now? Landon, do you have something? What do we?
Yes, let's end on a high note with your stuff. Because, listener, I do have a gaming thing to mention. I'm not even going to bother with the air horn because it's not worth it.
No.
As we've mentioned multiple times, Stadia is being killed off by Google. It is now officially dead as of January 18th, which was this past week. But in their killing off of Stadia, they did do a few decent things. Now, overall, I think the shutdown of Stadia was stupid, but they did it in a somewhat nice / positive way, I guess.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Because anybody that bought hardware or games through Google or Stadia, they got their money back. They were able to transfer over certain things from these games to different platforms and whatnot. I think doing that was the right thing to do in this case. Surprisingly, I mean, most companies are not going to do that. They're just like, well, we're done. We're sorry. Screw you. Peace out. But Google didn't do that. They, did decent things here. And their last little bit of something nice that they did when it comes to killing Stadia was anybody that has a Stadia controller, if you go to the Stadia website, plug your controller into the computer, you can do an update to your controller, and it will turn your controller into a full-on regular Bluetooth controller that you can use with whatever platform you want to use it with, which, again, great. Good on Google for doing this. Now,
Yeah,
the
no,
weird
definitely.
part is there is a limit, a time limit on this. You have to do it by the end of the year. I mean, if you haven't done it by the end of the year, I guess, that's on you because you've got 11 months to figure this out. It's not hard. But just so you know, that is going to happen. You won't be able to do this after December 31st of 2023. But I do like that they're doing that, so you'll be able to continue to use that controller if you want on other games, whether you're playing on your phone, on PlayStation, on Xbox, PC, or whatever. You'll be able to use that as a Bluetooth controller. It also does still work as a wired controller just right now. You can use it that way on anything as it is. But if you want to use it Bluetooth, then you got to go and update it to get that capability. But they are doing that, so there you go. That's most likely the last time we talk about Stadia in an official way, other than to maybe make fun of it every now and then, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I still haven't stopped mocking Google Plus, so yeah.
I loved Google Plus. I used Google Plus up until it died as well.
Well, I mean, a couple thoughts, I guess, on the whole Stadia thing I was thinking about. And one, so as Lana mentioned, some games people were able to actually transfer games. There's saved progress and stuff. But there are actually a few games that the developers couldn't. And individually, there was a few games like Red Dead Redemption and Destiny that apparently they couldn't pull off a lot of their stuff. So there was a guy or two that in Red Dead Redemption, they, I guess, couldn't save his profile. He had like 2,000 hours in it.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of.
So was he using Stadia like its entire lifetime to do that?
Yep, he was. He was using Stadia. And
I'm just saying, like, the entire time Stadia was alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
2,000 hours.
That's about how long it was live for.
Something that was cool that they actually did was they actually sent him and a couple other people that had a lot of Red Dead Redemption. It was Rockstar Games. Actually sent them gifts of, like, in-game, or not in-game, but, like, merch, if you will, for Red Dead. They're like, we're sorry,
Right.
this can't, but they did that. Which brings me to this, like, if you're a gamer, you're investing in things and these new things, I guess you're just going to have to, like, do some research a little bit more and not make it a permanent thing, or, like, I don't know, like, because I feel bad because these people that have put so many hours into Stadia, into this, and it just kind of just gone.
Yeah.
So all this time, all that,
I
guess
I'll
like
I'll argue against that. Just for, I mean, I understand that, but at the same time, it's like, if we want these platforms to keep going, I mean, Google's a bad example, but that's Google. They do this on the regular,
right?
But if we want these platforms to take off, we have to use them. So, I mean, I love that Rockstar Games did, and that's the gaming community in general. I mean, obviously, some of these AAA developers don't care about their customers that much. EA is a great example.
EA,
yeah, but especially like these indie developers, they care about their customers. They care about the people playing their games. They're going to take care of them, and so that's where I would argue against that. It's like, okay, if you do think these platforms are the way you want to continue your gaming experience, go for it. Because just keep in mind who you're supporting in these scenarios, because, like you said, some of these game developers will take care of you in these situations because they want you to stick with them. They want you to continue to be a customer, to continue playing their games. And so, and again, if you tend to use these platforms, most of the time they're going to keep going. I mean, Google, from what I understand, people that played a lot of stuff on Stadia really liked it. It's just Google didn't give it enough time. And unfortunately, they kind of launched it at the wrong time, right before the pandemic hit, right when everyone's at home, can play easily on a console or on their PC instead of streaming. So they needed to give this more time, like what Microsoft has done with xCloud or GeForce Now. Like, these things take a while to take off. They needed to just let it simmer for a while, and eventually it probably would have started to rise in users and whatnot. But that's on Google. But Google has never been, I mean, they've never done the gaming thing, so that's their own fault, and they kill things off just for fun. So that's on them.
Yes.
But I think when it comes to other things like this, if it's something that you think you're going to use on a regular basis, keep doing it. Let the company know that you're going to use it. Don't just go in, maybe I'll use it here and there, and then when it dies off, I mean, yes, you're not in as big of hurt, but
yeah,
it's because you weren't using it. That's my opinion.
No, I think I apologize. I don't think I iterated what I was meaning. I guess it was more along the lines like something like this. And I know things are changing. The gaming industry's changed so much, so it's hard to really predict with anything. But I guess what I was meaning was like something new like this and whatnot. Not to put like, I guess, your eggs, your time into one basket, if you will. Something new, something like that, and always kind of be aware. And we've always joked that with Google too. And I guess with a lot of these new things that are happening, I guess I was just kind of more along the lines of just kind of like, just be aware, have more mindful, not just, oh, if I buy this, this will be here. And this is also kind of a warning of, I mean, it's digital, these digital games, and it's just a license. So like, you know, what if Microsoft just killed Xbox? Like, that's a lot of games. Caleb and I were comparing games the other day. His Stadia, his library of digital games on Steam, and I was comparing it to my Xbox. We have so much games that are digital.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just interesting to think. And what I was saying was, you know, this is kind of one of those big eye-opening things with Stadia. Just kind of like, you know, kind of take a look at this, you know, with this industry and what's happening and how fast it can just go away.
It's a good reminder to just keep in mind that anything on the internet, people say, hey, it's on the internet, it is forever. But there's a giant caveat to that. The existence, like the acknowledgement of it, that will forever exist. Like, nobody's ever going to forget that Stadia existed. You know, as much as Google wants us to forget about all of their canceled projects, there's literally a website dedicated to tracking them. And so, like, yeah, that's never going away. But the services themselves can absolutely vanish. And like, anybody who had bought music through for their Zune, for instance,
I did.
Like, that's a thing that just ceased to exist. Now, they did give you the option to transfer that music elsewhere, did they not?
So it was weird because there were certain CDs that I had owned that I ripped, and the stuff like that I was able to transfer because it was a license that was mine.
Right.
When I bought it online, it was a Zune license, so they couldn't transfer those songs. It was a whole.
Oh man,
it was kind of a mess. So
yeah,
it and like I said, I guess I was just bringing it up. It's not anything like buyer beware. Don't invest in new things, because I agree with Landon saying this is good. We want to try and push this innovation. Stadia was good, or it is. The technology is good, but it was more of, you know, I think of these guys putting 2,000 hours. That's a lot of time into one game, and for the lifetime of Stadia, well, however long. And it's just, and I guess I'm saying, like, you know, just, I guess be more mindful. Because I know you find a game.
Just recognize when you are doing anything like this. Just recognize that this is finite. It can end. It may seem like it's not going to end, but it absolutely can. And, you know, I talk a big game about how, like, a significant portion of my, you know, like, I play on PC because the library is so huge, and I can play games that are 30 and 40 years old on my brand new computer and stuff like that. Like, that's why I play PC games. But it's worth noting that, like, frickin' oh gosh, what was it I just tried to play not that long ago? You can't play anymore because back in the early noughts, they were doing stupid things with piracy prevention and like anti-cheat verification and crap like that. And all of the servers for those services, they're gone. They don't exist anymore. And so you can't authenticate the game. And so the game won't actually play anymore. And this is like physical media that I own, that I can hold in my hands and put in a CD drive, but it just doesn't work anymore because some tiny aspect of it just doesn't exist. And so like you just got to recognize all of these things can end, and like I guess manage your behavior and your expectations appropriately. And like maybe this dude understood when he was putting 2,000 hours into RDR on Stadia, he was doing it the whole time thinking to himself, you know what? Google could cancel this at any minute because it's Google and they kind of have that reputation. And so long as he understood that and that was the choice he made, okay, I'm happy it worked out for him. I'm glad that he got to enjoy 2,000 hours of RDR. Like I assume he likes the game, you know. I'm guessing he enjoys Red Dead Redemption.
It's a lot of hours.
I'm going to assume that he enjoyed playing those 2,000 hours. But just listener, just make sure you just keep in the back of your mind the understanding with all of this computer, any computer thing out there, it takes work. It takes effort to preserve this stuff. And if it matters to you that something is preserved, something is maintained for your life and for future generations, then you need to be a part of the solution for that. And you need to be working to help put things in place to where this sort of thing can be preserved. In the case of Stadia, Google actually did right by a lot of people by issuing refunds for purchased stuff, by making sure that people could transfer their save game data off, if possible, to other systems and to other platforms. But not everybody does that. So as a part of the community, you kind of need to be willing to put in some of your own legwork, if you can, to make that sort of thing happen for other people in order to make sure that, you know, the gaming space and the gaming community can continue to hold on to these things as, you know, services come and they go and new things come and then they fail and they stop existing and so on and so forth. So that's kind of where it lands.
I just, like I said, I had thoughts on it and the whole thing, and because I had read some of those about like people putting so much time into that, and it's just interesting, you know. Thank goodness that there was the community, like Landon was saying. Thank goodness that was there. Thank goodness Google decided to do pretty much, I don't know, one of the better things they could do. You know, here's full refunds. People have already gotten them. I've heard people got their refunds for controllers and games and things that they've bought, and which is great to hear. So, but it's just, I guess, like I said, just wanted to kind of bring that up to like kind of really have that in the back of your mind, like Caleb said. Just kind of big. Just be aware, and you know, with these things and all this digital data and everything, can happen. So, but yeah, I won't repeat myself again, but I just kind of wanted to have thoughts on there, and it'll be interesting to see what happens if Google does anything with that technology, because to what I heard, it was great. You know, that streaming was pretty cool. So we'll have to see what happens with that. I'm sure something will come out of it, whether they sell the technology or license it, or who knows, something will happen. So, all right, well, we'll end that unless anyone has other thoughts on Stadia.
Nope.
I'm gonna take the silence as a no.
I think I'm good.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and finish up our gaming news with something positive? That's what I'm hearing. Pretty positive. Caleb?
It's pretty positive. You know, speaking along the lines of being a member of the gaming community that's focused on maintaining the history of what has come before and making sure that this giant archive of games is never forgotten and is available and updated and ready for future generations and whatnot. Let's go ahead and talk about how Doom modders are the best people on the planet.
Oh, this is literally probably my favorite segment. Even though sometimes I talk, I'm like, nah, it's nothing. I love this segment.
it's a wonderful thing to see some of the ways that Doom has been perpetuated and brought to, like, anybody can play Doom. I mean, if you've got an old computer, you can play Doom. If you've got a new computer, you can play Doom. If you've got a MacBook Pro with a touch bar, you can play Doom. If you've got a treadmill, you can play Doom. If you've got a pregnancy test, you can play Doom. If you've got a John Deere tractor, turns out you can play Doom on that. And now, for the ultimate in portability, a modder has ported Doom to the Thumby. Okay, so Thumby is how you spell that, Thumb-E. This thing is the most impossibly small handheld console you have ever seen in your life. Like, you see video or photos of people holding this thing, their thumbs are literally the size of the console they're trying to hold. It looks as unergonomic as it possibly could be to try and push the buttons on this little tiny Game Boy with the screen literally the size of a thumbnail.
This is amazing. I'm looking at
so
this thing.
dinky.
It looks like
I'm looking at this now.
It looks like a mini Game Boy that you would have as a keychain. I want one now.
That is exactly what it is. But it has a built-in battery. It has a built-in microprocessor. The thing is a self-contained little game console. Granted, obviously in that size, it's not a powerful game console, like not by any stretch of the imagination. And we think of Doom as being a game that is, freak, this year turning 30, right? This game is 30 years old, just about. It's an old game. We think of that, and holy crap, computers 30 years ago? Like, my phone is so much more powerful than high-end computers from 30 years ago that it's not even funny anymore, you know? Yeah. Like, this, freaking your smartwatches walk all over these computers in terms of processing power and even storage and RAM and stuff like that. So, you know, it's not nothing to point out that Doom ran on those computers. But even still, to get it to run on a Thumby, this guy had to backport it, right? He had to take Doom, he had to make it worse. He had to make it worse in order to get it to run on this thing. And if you look at the footage of him playing it, obviously the graphics on this screen it's black and white. There's not even any grays in there. It's just the tiniest black and white little LCD display you've ever seen. And yeah, you can register the existence of enemies occasionally when they move, and you can shoot at them with, I wouldn't call it precision, but you push buttons and things happen. So yeah, it is playable. And there you go. Another achievement. You can play Doom on a game console that is literally, like Landon said, it's a keychain.
It's only $30.
Yeah, it's not even that expensive. So that's pretty good. I mean, Doom stuff continues to amaze. There was even a guy who demade Doom in order to get it to run on the Intel 8088, which is one of Intel's first processors. Like, that thing came out in 1979, I think, 1978, something like that. Pre-80s processor, okay? The Intel 8088. Like, it was the second generation after the Intel 8086. So you can demake Doom back to get it to run on some properly archaic hardware. And the Thumby counts in that category. So there you go. Doom modders, they're wild, they're crazy, they're unpredictable. They continue to be some of the best people on the internet.
Absolutely.
So there you have it.
Look at that. Just look up Thumby, dear listener. But then if you want to put Doom on the side, it's, oh my goodness. And Doom modders, just don't go changing, okay?
Oh yeah, don't change.
Keep going forward.
Please don't change.
I hope AI takes after the spirit of that. Like, that's the type of spirit we need. My goodness.
Yeah, no, seriously. We just need AI to be like getting Doom. What we need is we need an AI that generates more and more like ridiculous, absurd game hardware like the Thumby. And then we need another AI who's competing with it to get Doom to run on all of the weird hardware that it generates.
Oh my goodness.
Just have these two bouncing off of each other forever. That's That's peak artificial intelligence right there.
That is amazing. And if Microsoft can do that, they won whatever war you want to call that. The search war, whatever. I don't care. That's awesome. All right. I think we've come to the end of the episode. Unless you have one more thing, Landon.
Nope.
One more thing. All right. Okay, dear listener, if you want to get a hold of us, you can on our social media platforms, as well as callingallplatforms.com. If you want to check out our videos, you can over at Calling All Platforms on YouTube. You can also support Landon for putting up with us chuckleheads, and go over to Patreon and throw us $1, throw us $2 a month, or $3. There's a couple different tiers there if you want to take a look at. Take a look at some of our goals. Goals are pretty fun. I mean, I would love to whip out an old Windows phone and make Caleb use it. Okay, I think it would be a lot of fun. I have one. I did. I pulled it out the other day and I showed him. I was like, check this out. It may only run 3G, but check this out. Oh, it's too fun. But yeah, check out some goals. Throw some support over to Landon. And dear listener, you have a good week.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Calling All Platforms is a production of Supporter Sound Studios. To learn more about how you can support the podcast, go to www.patreon.com/callingallplatforms.